We can go ahead and get started.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody.
Okay, let me pull up the agenda here. Hi, Megan. Okay. Kaylee, can you unmute yourself with us here? So the first thing we have on our agenda, we'll get started. It's 1:02. This is a work session. County press release. Kaylee, do you want to talk through that with us a little bit?
Hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, so I don't know, I see Janine is on. I'll text Colleen to make sure she's coming on. There's kind of a joint idea to get a press release going from the city and county as our EOC policy group, and just to give a general update. I think it's good for the community to hear from you guys. And I know that y'all have some updates like assisting St. George and council earmarking some funding to go to their relief program. I know they haven't really figured out the details there. And just like a general update, I think that would be beneficial. Kayla, I know that you had a draft press release. So we could throw that into a Google Doc or something so we could all work on it together and get approval and work with Betty and Beth, our PIOs. So it's just the initial thought.
Okay. Would you mind putting that into a Google Doc and sharing the link with us so we can put information in there and finalize that and share it with the city?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think, okay, Mark is on. Mark, do you have anything, or Sarah, do you have anything to add to that?
To what?
Press release?
I was thinking that we could add just some sort of few words to reiterate not to travel outside the county to recreate. I thought.
Yeah, I think what we can definitely add that in. Kaylee will share that Google Doc link and then we can add in that language.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's just what part of the bigger conversation on that, you know, a lot of our surrounding counties have put out really explicit messaging on we're not open to visitors.
Right.
And to have a decision from the policy group on what exactly you want that language to be so we can share it out. And I know I'm kind of like jumping around the agenda since everything kind of blends together. But it also goes to say when in a couple of weeks, when ideally, if it's not pushed back, we're supposed to be lifting the stay-at-home order. And how do we make sure that we're all on the same page? And this is really Colleen's idea on, hey, we need to make sure we're in a ready position and that we all reflect like Summit and Eagle. And I don't know how we get on the same page with them, but opening up to business again, quote unquote, it's not going to look the same. We know that at the same time. So someone or a county is not flooded with a certain amount of visitors and we're all kind of reflecting each other on the same page, which I think has always been a goal from the beginning, is to kind of reflect and keep up with Summit and Eagle. And we know that's hard because they're not in our region. So there's certainly some weird boundaries there, but certainly think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. Greg, thanks for joining us. We were just talking about putting out a joint press release from the city and county, kind of detailing the event and things that we've done to get through the event, and kind of reiterating those points of following the stay-at-home order, asking folks to recreate within their community, not to travel outside of the community if it's not necessary, kind of thing. So Kaylee's going to set us up with a Google Doc and share the link with you and Sarah Dallas at the city, so that you can also help us complete and draft that press release to put out.
You're muted, Mayor. There, I'll unmute you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. That was my fault. Oh. Mayor?
I can't hear.
Oh, did you guys mute me again?
You're good. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Every time I try and talk, you mute me. No, I like what you're doing. I think any and all communication that we can get to the public is going to be helpful right now. We do have a newsletter dropping in the mail this week. I don't know what day it will arrive from the city, but you know, we wrote it like 2 weeks ago, and things change every hour on the hour. So it's hard to get information out quickly.
Kaylee, I have a question for you. As far as, and I would say Colleen, if she were also on, but as far as staying in line with Eagle and Summit for a recovery and reopening, and I wonder if part of that, but staying in line, is actually following them a week or two behind, so that we don't also get inundated and we can see what the effects or anticipated consequences may be in an influx or a flood of folks coming into Summit and Eagle. Just not necessarily something to talk about right now, but has that been discussed at all? I know we're trying to get geared up if we do see waves of cases still coming in. We all know that this is not, we're not beating COVID, we're just lessening the curve. So we still must be prepared, and everybody has to be on their toes to still transport folks out of the community.
Yeah, I don't think we've had any distinct conversation on that recovery reopening piece, but it certainly is the theme of our event. In a weird, twisted sense, we are fortunate that our surrounding counties have had a lot of lessons learned and pushed out a lot of good information that we were able to take and make our own. So yeah, I think that's definitely a conversation, and hopefully maybe at the end of this week, maybe we can all get on a call with Summit Eagle, maybe Chafee. I know that Chafee is working closely with Gunnison, and kind of get a game plan. I certainly don't know if I would love to hear that. Hey, we're gonna wait for you to figure it out, so we can figure out that messaging a little bit more. But I think it would certainly be nice to get on the same page 2 weeks in advance, assuming that it will be lifted. Go ahead, Kayla.
Sorry, I had talked to the county managers in Silverthorne, in Summit and Eagle. They were creating public health task force to start the work for recovery efforts and what it means when they lift the stay-at-home orders. So they were having those meetings this week, and then would connect back after this week once they have formed their task force and started that process so that we could all be on the same page about that, so that there's not a huge influx of people from Lake County into those communities once that stay home order is lifted.
Or vice versa.
Uh-huh.
Did they offer us a spot on that task force, Kayla?
Yeah. So I'd be happy to sit on that with them once those conversations start.
Who's being comprised of that? Is that like
They
their
haven't-
public officials?
They
or-
have not built those task forces yet.
That's great to know that.
Mhm.
Obviously, we can assume that something is already in the works, but great to know that we have a place there and then can all get on the same page easily and then go from there. I
Mhm.
don't
Yeah.
think we want to bombard them until you get a general sense.
I think it'd
Yeah.
be great if we could have more than one person join and Kaylee could join, that'd be awesome as well, probably.
Yeah, Eagle County had suggested our public health director as
Yeah.
well. So I don't see Colleen, but I can reach out to Colleen and ask her if she'd be, oh, maybe there she is. See if that'd be something her or Kaylee would be interested in, so.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Kaylee.
I was just saying, happy to help in any way.
Okay, cool. I'll keep everybody posted of what's happening as I get information from them. Next on our agenda is county closure. Kaylee, do you want to talk us through this a little bit?
Yes. Again, it just kind of goes to say with what we were just talking about and deciding as a policy group. And again, I don't want to steal Janine or Colleen's thunder on this as our unified command. But I think we certainly need to come to a decision on if we want to push out information. You know, there's rumors going around for different counties, for ours, about closing borders. People on Facebook are saying you need to close our county. And we've already talked about we don't have the resources, nor would we close our borders like that at this state. But I certainly think a decision should be made on, yes, let's decide to push out Lake County is closed to visitors. And same goes with pushing out messaging that Lake County residents should not be going into other counties unless it is for that essential errands or items or work, or, you know, try and think if you can get something here in Lake, then you certainly don't need to be going anywhere else.
Is this not in line with the press release? Or do we want
And
to
I
push
think
it?
it is.
Say that again, Kaylee.
I think it's all kind of a blurred conversation. You know, I think we could just do a press release on what the city and county are working on, and what the government entities, the BOCC and the council and mayor are specifically doing. But also, I think it would be good to certainly get our language out there on what the decision is.
I'm wondering because last time this got brought up in some conversation, I think it was a lot of the perception of folks coming in. So do we have a different sense or an improved, more informed sense of, from law enforcement or maybe the city on the kind of travel we are seeing and if it is a problem? I know we were working on getting signage out to trailheads or recreation spots. So has this increased according to folks? I have not gotten the communication that I personally had received was from, constituents, and my sense right now is that we might not need to increase the message, but be consistent in pushing it out. That we would prefer for people not to come in and not to travel out.
I've gotten,
Go ahead, Mayor.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say, I don't think we should necessarily be trying to solve problems that don't exist. And I mean, I know
That's what I'm,
that
trying to
I know that
ask.
everybody means well, but I think saying that no one can cross our borders is just, it's pretty overbearing. And remember, about this time of year, this is a time when, especially people in our community, want to recreate, and they have to go south to do it, to get out of the snow. So I just have and I would say outdoor recreation is the best form of social distancing and mental health. I just feel like maybe that's a bit much, although I will certainly support whatever you guys decide. It's just my feeling on the matter.
Yeah, I agree that the recreation is very important, and I think you know, it's not necessarily our circus to be telling people to not go into Chaffee where it's warmer. They're working on that messaging themselves, but I certainly, and this is Kaylee personally, I wouldn't want our Lake County residents to be going into a county who's actively working so very hard on pushing out the messaging that they're not open to visitors, and to help them, because they're, you know, we do know that they have, well, they've tested more because they had a testing site, but they have more cases. And again, I don't want to push out any negative messaging and saying no one can cross our county lines. I think it's, again, a discussion on how would it best be received. You know, Lake County residents are doing their part, and we're still giving our business to our local businesses and entities here, and we're staying in our county and recreating and doing a big positive spin in that way. But
So what besides
I'm
the
not
press
sure.
release are we looking for? And who's asking for it?
Is Colleen on? Because this conversation is coming a lot from just our entire group. You know, we're getting questions. I'm still getting calls on my cell phone about short-term rentals. And again, no one knows the situation on if it's their second home or if they're
Right.
a worker, but we're still getting calls. And I don't know if anyone from law enforcement is on who can chime in. But I'm hearing it more from the public now, and I think we just need to make a decision and stance and say something. Whatever y'all decide on. I just think it's...
Kaylee, I had also heard the concern about second homeowners coming from other counties and communities that have a higher volume of positive cases, and the concern about that travel of them coming on the weekends to their second home, and bringing potential exposure here. Is that something that you've also heard?
I mean, I've heard stuff about second homeowners, but at the end of the day, I don't believe we have any stance there. If they're a homeowner, they have every right to be up here. Makes sense to me. But maybe it would help. Maybe if they saw one messaging like Lake County is doing what we can, we are staying put, we are staying within our county, except for essential business. And maybe they'll say, oh, they're taking it serious. Maybe I shouldn't go up and I should stay where I'm at in my first home. I'm not sure.
So is it more of a request? Would it come more as a request in the form of communication from public health? That public health is requesting, and incident command is requesting that we're doing our part in respecting those stay-home orders and not traveling into neighboring counties. And we're requesting the same of others to please continue not to come to Lake County to recreate, that kind of thing. Is that what we're looking for?
Hey guys, this is Colleen.
Yeah, I think-
Apparently, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. I've been on, and because this is a phone call, I completely forgot to unmute myself. But I was like, wait, it's *6, isn't it? So I've tried to jump in a few times and thinking like, oh, they're just ignoring me. But apparently I wasn't unmuted. So
Sorry, Colleen.
I think, and thank you, Sarah. Sarah like texted me like, are you? I'm like, I'm totally on. Can you not hear me? And then I was like, unmute yourself. But basically, I think, and I apologize, I am late. I came in about 10 minutes ago as I was on the phone with the hospital, and we can talk about that offline. But basically, the piece is, it's not like, hey, public health is saying, like, we are in agreement as a policy group, because I'm looking at the language specifically that's, that Chaffey County is pushing out. And so when we talk about people heading south, please know that they are in violation of the Chaffey County's public health orders. I'm not here to tell I'm not going to be here to be like, oh, you're in violation, that people have to make their own decision, but we should recognize that they are actually in violation. So if you are doing that, you're in violation of Chaffey County's public health orders, who are saying, their orders specifically say that they are closed for tourism and leisure at this time. So just be mindful of that. And so that becomes that bigger question when I read their messaging. It's the health and safety of our community and guests are our top focus. Chaffey County is not open for tourism or leisure at this time. Visitors of Chaffey County are directed to return home, and persons considering visiting Chaffey County should remain home to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So that is their messaging. The question is, are we as a policy group, I am comfortable with that. I think that's important. And what I'm hearing from the public is that there is a lot of folks coming into our community and different people being like, oh, go use my house for the weekend. And so there's not this,
You're not adhering.
Is that what? I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
And so there's not that responsibility where they're literally using, the governor specifically asks, please do not use loopholes. Our second homeowners are totally using a loophole, right? In the sense of stay at home and stay in your primary home of residence. Like I had a gentleman from Larimer County who felt confident, like, oh, I'm going to come up. I had to do social distancing. And I'm like, is this your home? He's like, well, no. I'm like, where's your main home? I'm like, Larimer. Then why are you coming up there? Stay at home, not come to your second home and, and bring a bunch of people with you. And I think that's kind of where we're at. And I think that's what our community is asking for. And I agree. We cannot close our borders. Like, right. I have, a partner that travels to and from Summit for work. Like that's not realistic, and I don't want to go there, but I think we can get harder in our messaging and push that out. And I don't know that you're comfortable calling our second homeowners out, but I think, if you want me to put that down and be like, hey, this includes you second homeowners, they're literally finding a loophole, which the governor specifically asked not to. Obviously, I know with CCI, you push that all the way up to, the governor at that point. I don't know if there's any movement on that as far as the governor wanting to come against that, but we have to recognize too, down in Denver, right, they have their hotels open there, and we do not, and I think that's super important. And I think the other piece, I realize I'm rambling on, I think the other piece is we need to take this seriously. You haven't already. Like, I am getting more hits of people that are now testing in other counties that are positive and either hospitalized or worse, and so we just have to be mindful that as we get more information, we have to recognize that is there a way that we can continue to protect ourselves. So I think, Kaylee, you were saying, I'm trying to get a meeting with Chaffey, Eagle, Summit, Gunnison to say, hey, if the governor on the 26th says, hey, let's lift everything, I'm not comfortable with that as a public health director and trying to, support our community, because that just means we're going to have a flood of people come into our community, and I'm not comfortable with that, where recognize that we can have public health orders that are stricter than the states. And so I think that's part of the conversation too, of what do those different pieces look like. And I know environmental health wise, the state is trying to come up with guidance for restaurants and bars of like, hey, if we were to open, tomorrow, what does that look like? Because it's not just open as you were, like this is a new world, and we have to be recognized that until we have this under control all the way across, that we have to be mindful, and we can't just be like, oh, everything's open, come on up, and we totally spike, overwhelm our system, and then we have mass fatalities, and I'm not comfortable with that.
And I'd like to, Amber has her hand up, so I want to ask her to comment, because I'm sure She has some rec perspective there.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to add in that. Sorry, I'm walking and listening to you. If there is a space to add in, whether it's the press release or a separate order or language, just to remind folks about what is open for recreation in Lake County. We are having quite a few problems with the parks and playgrounds, especially the skate park, where people are not supposed to be recreating, and they're ripping down signs and pulling down caution tape. And so we're calling the police department every time we see folks there and just having a really hard time with that. So if there's room for that language and a reminder, I think it would be great.
Thanks, Amber. So it seems like in a press release, we need to reinforce adjacent county messages with stronger language, reiterate maybe Lake County's capacity to actually have folks and kind of remind them not only of the climate or the elevation, but the healthcare resources that are limited, transport resources that are limited, other emergency services and responses should anybody be up here recreating. Again, too, you know, we can call the Forest Service, and you know, now that we're mid-April and the conversation happened 2 weeks ago on opening of the campgrounds and whatnot, that's also a partner to reach out to. And again, kind of that question that I had on, you know, yes, we want to be in line as best we can with Summit and Eagle, but that may be, in my opinion, coming in a little staggered and in a next wave or phase from Summit and Eagle, so that we aren't all flooded at the same time, because we don't have the capacity to handle that.
How about, so this is Janine, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
How about if the press word is in the format of what you can do and what you can't do? So right now, please don't do these things, but you can do these things. So, you know, people may be feeling like, I've got to get out, I've got to do something. So could we outline some things that people could do? You know, take a walk 6 feet away, you know, that kind of thing, and where you can take a walk, but emphasize the things that are not available right now. Like there's a fire ban, you can't go into Chaffee County, you shouldn't be going other than work into any other county, you know, and there's a public health reason for it. I think people are sort of forgetting it, but Colleen just really stated it. We do not want other people who are positive coming into our county. Bottom line, like that's not a good idea. So it's not just a restriction just for the sake of a restriction, but you don't want people coming in and infecting, and you don't want them getting sick in your county because of your medical capacity. So just to remind them, this is based on the fact that we can't handle a lot of people getting sick here, and we don't want people who are infected or testing positive. I mean, you don't want somebody who comes and hangs out for the weekend or a week at their second home in Lake County, going
Absolutely.
back to Denver and turning around testing positive. Like that's the whole reason that you're doing it.
Right.
So I don't think it hurts to state that.
Yep. I agree. I think it needs to be more specific, and yeah, we can play with the format maybe, and yep.
Yeah, we can, and on Janine's point, I think it was the governor's office with their infographics released one that's just right down the middle. One side is green and it says everything you can do, and the other side is red and says everything you can't do. We can make a Lake County one. I will still share that Google Doc to get that city and county press release, and I'll just copy and paste what Kayla had already worked on, and then we can send a note. I know Beth is on this call, so maybe Beth and I and Janine and Colleen can get some drafted language together and share with the policy group on the stronger language that we're talking about. And you know, people who recreate in their county and contaminate it. I mean, it's not like a
that's worth noting. And even if we need to cite some examples of where people visited other counties and went home and tested positive, and that's not what you want to have happen. That is the number one reason that large groups, even before all the orders got started, were having trouble. They were going into large groups and then going home to their homes in multiple states, in other counties. And then you just bring it with you. So.
Yeah, I think that has been the bulk of the feedback that I have heard is, we just don't want people traveling from places where there is the potential for exposure and then bringing that here to increase our exposure.
And we've done keeping that from happening. I mean, because we're so close to these hotspots.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Is that just me?
So just the fact that we have lived so.
No, she's breaking up pretty badly.
Yeah, I can't hear her anymore.
Okay, sorry.
Janine, was that you? I could hear you.
That's okay.
Yep,
That's
now
okay.
I can hear
Go
you.
ahead.
You're
Okay.
next.
Well, we
You're
just- don't worry about it. It's okay.
okay.
So Kaylee, I think we're good with going forward with that press release. If you'll put it in a Google Doc, and then adding into that press release an infographic document for us to release of do's and don'ts. So I think if we can get that started, that'd be awesome. Paul, do you wanted to give us an update on special events as well? You want to hop in here and do that?
Yeah. I'd like, my staff and I have a staff meeting tomorrow, and we'd like to be able to present to the board our conclusions about it. But we're starting to get more applications for special events. And this is, I think, germane to the conversation we've just been having. I think many of our surrounding counties have actually canceled all of their special events throughout the summer. I know Boom Days has been canceled, and I think the BV Bike Fest has been canceled. And I think we're probably going to be looking for some kind of action from the Board of County Commissioners about special events. We've just had, we just processed one of them, and I can't remember what it is, a special event that the sheriff just said, absolutely not. Well, of course the sheriff's going to say absolutely not for an event, I think, in end of May or sometime in June. We may even want to go into July. We may want to talk about the rest of the summer. I don't, as it is, I'd like to be able to confer with my staff about this topic before we bring it to the board. But if you have any questions of me that you'd like to introduce to me and my staff, I'd be happy to take them.
Colleen, do you have any kind of recommendation or any information to give Paul at this point?
Yeah, Paul, so Stacy reached out to me from your staff, and I said, hey, what we need to do is we need to put that disclaimer in. Please recognize that your event may be canceled due to the ongoing response to COVID-19 to decrease transmission. So I did give her wording specifically to anyone who's applying. Obviously, she said there was nothing in May, because if there was, I would cancel it. So even if it's something on May 20th, I'm not comfortable with that. I think we need to keep that going. I think a lot's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, and we'll have more information, but I think people need to be mindful of that, because I'm not comfortable with all of a sudden, like I said, I'm not comfortable with all of a sudden we drop, our guard down and we bring, and I think that was Janine's point, like we are so close to Denver, we're so close to so many of these other places where, as we know, people who don't have symptoms have the ability to spread it, and not everyone is following all the rules as well. And so my point is, I couldn't imagine bringing a crowd of 100 plus in May, and maybe in June, maybe, we're limiting the amount of participants, or what does that look like? Or maybe it's easier just to close it because of law enforcement. We don't have the ability to control an event. So at this point in time, I think that language that I gave Stacy yesterday is, just warning folks like, hey, just recognize this may or may not happen. And as you can imagine, like Boom Days made that decision independently. They didn't reach out to us. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad decision. We just don't know what it looks like at this point.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. This is Commissioner Glenn. I think it goes without saying that we just don't entertain any events this summer. I appreciate the people's optimism that think we're going to be out of this in June. I don't think so. It's going to take a while. And I would just err on the side of safety for everyone and not allow large groups in Lake County this summer. That's all.
I think also one of the things we should pay attention to is that the Trail 100 events are international events. We're going to be bringing people in from around the world on these events. So just something else to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think that clearly, like the BB Bike Fest is traveling from county to county in different spots and things like that, especially should in the next 2 months shouldn't be entertained. But I think that if you include that disclaimer and if you are seeing more and more requests, then keep us, yeah, we'll have that conversation. I'm eager to hear what you can bring to us and after your meeting tomorrow.
Hey, Paul, this is Kaylee. Are you going to rope in like the Forest Service? Because obviously I know that they have to get approval for all of the events, but the Forest Service might just put their foot down anyways and say, yeah, all of the events that are happening on our land aren't happening anyways. So just to get ahead of that, because they might, I know that they're having their own conversations about obviously with their new orders of fire restrictions and developed sites closed, but I'm sure that they're thinking of some other event specific.
Yeah, Kaylee, the Forest Service is on our referral list when we get an event and we refer it out, and you're on it too. The fact is, though, that the Forest Service doesn't reciprocate on this. They don't notify us when they have an application for an event. And we have no zoning authority on public lands. We will continue to notify the Forest Service, and as we always do, but we don't often get a response.
Okay. So Paul, going into the summertime with special events, and Colleen, should we just kind of play that by ear at this point then?
So at this point in time, I think, like I said, I feel like we'll have a lot more information in the next 2 weeks. So I'm okay with holding off before we make that decision. But I do want to give a shout out to Commissioner Glenn in that respect, where, if we were truly being, cautious and truly protecting our community, that would be the ultimate way to do it, in the sense of decreasing large crowds in our county. But I also understand, the balance that we're all trying to strike right now. So at this point in time, I'm okay with playing it by ear, but being mindful and seeing what's happening. And I have a call tomorrow with the state, with all public health directors, and I will push that out to see what the pulse is there.
But to be clear, any events scheduled in May are canceled. Is that correct?
From my understanding, there were none, so I didn't have to cancel anything.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think what's concerning me now is the Leadville district and the campgrounds being open, and that clear communication of being open for local use and not promoting folks to travel here. And I'll draft an email with get Patrick Mercer connected with all of us to follow up on this conversation with him from the Forest Service.
All right, well, Mark, your point is well taken, Mark. And I think it's very possible that that may be the direction that we go. But as a Board of County Commissioners, I'll update you on staff's discussion. And in fact, if you like, you can join us on Teams.
When is it, Paul?
Tomorrow morning at 9
On what did you say? You broke out for me.
on Teams.
Oh, okay.
Teams.
I won't be able to join you tomorrow, but
Okay. So I think going into the special events, I think Colleen, I think it would be beneficial for us to revisit that in the next 2 weeks once you have that information that you can see coming down in the next 2 weeks. And then at that point we can look at making a decision about what's going to happen for the rest of the summer with those special event permits. And definitely agree, Paul, that Commissioner Glenn's point is very well taken. Definitely, and I think those are discussions that we can further continue to have going into the summer. So, Brad, did you have anything to add?
Yes, we had the Memorial Day service for 10th Mountain Division has been canceled for Memorial Day. And then the service I do has also been canceled for Memorial Day. Did you hear that?
yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Kaylee, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in that I just sent, I believe, the commissioners who were on the email yesterday, the information that we received from DOLA, and I see that Christy is on now, and it kind of goes hand in hand with everything we've been talking about events and closures. And yesterday on our regional call, Greg from DOLA shared like a community recovery kickoff slide deck. And I think I just wanted to mention that I think that's something that we need to form a team around or expand on an existing team and work through those considerations, because I think it'll touch on a lot of the stuff that we're already thinking about.
Christy, do you want to talk through that a little bit with us?
And I can share my screen if it helps you.
Yeah, it's up to you, Kayla, if you want to. I wasn't on the call yesterday when Greg gave those out. We're kind of sharing all of the phone call responsibilities. So yes, we are starting the recovery conversations with our communities, knowing full well that there is still a large response that's taking place by your emergency managers and public health directors and others in your community. But we are also recognizing that as we move through this event, that there are going to be some short-term and long-term recovery aspects that we really should start talking about. And you're right, having these discussions about whether or not events will take place in your community is part of that conversation, right? It's going to affect your budgets at your organizations, and it's going to affect your business community and others in the community that may rely on that. And so what does recovery, economic recovery, potentially look like moving forward? So one of the things that we have been talking to communities about, just starting that conversation, is really starting to identify who your team is at the local level. So at the state level, the recovery task force has been activated. So there are state agencies who are identified in state statute as needing to work together to bring recovery resources to communities. We are working to fully understand what's in the CARES Act, what's in other federal pieces of legislation, and trying to get that information out. We know that there will be funding for DOLA in different places, but we're still working to figure out the parameters of that. And commissioners, you know, I sent out that email maybe Friday. It all kind of blurs together on what some of your needs might be. So we're really starting to gather that information to see what our communities are going to need in the long term and in the short term. So just know that as your regional manager, I will continue to stay in contact with you as more information comes out. But at the local level, what's really going to help is for you all to kind of coalesce as much as possible. So the county, I'm thinking geographic county when I say county. So the county, the city of Leadville, and other partners within the community. So it might be your Economic Development Corporation, your Chamber of Commerce, other nonprofit partners that are providing services in your community should really be part of this economic recovery team so that you are able to engage your community as a whole. So, you know, this is very different from a fire or a flood, where we would have kind of our steps of damage assessment and really, you know, able to understand when we move from response to recovery. But what we're thinking of when we think damage assessment now, we're kind of using that term to help you all start with some fiscal scenario planning. So I sent out, it's been a couple weeks, so I'm happy to send it out again because I know you all are being inundated with wonderful information and it's hard to keep track of. But this idea of fiscal scenario planning for your organization. So looking at your revenues and expenditures, what might, how might these affect your staffing internally, facilities, capital projects that you had planned? There are a couple groups that are offering free or super reduced services for local governments. We cannot recommend any of them, but I'm happy to send the information to you. One of them is called Balancing Act. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're offering a free scenario planning dashboard for local governments. You would input your data, budget data into their software, and then you can kind of play around with what would happen if we needed to decrease our sales tax revenue by X amount or increase, you know, our expenditures in this place by X amount. It would help you understand how you would balance your budget. Resource X, which used to be the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting, Chris Fabian, he's also offering some free, I think free for the next 3 months, scenario planning technical assistance. So I would suggest looking at both of those and seeing if there's something there that would help your organization just start thinking forward. We know there are going to be short-term effects to the budget, but there will also be long-term. We can't define short and long-term at this point. So just trying to get a handle on what things look like for your organization. So if you don't have someone in your organization now who could really focus on recovery, if there's a way for you to identify a recovery manager that can help process this information, because there's going to be a lot coming out. Kaylee has a job to do, so having someone who's responsible both for response and recovery, having that be the same person can be difficult. Keep it all going. If there's someone who can take on that responsibility, kind of help just bring all of that information together. Short term, other considerations, and I'm sure that Colleen is working on this. What does it look like when you start returning to work, or when your employees start returning? Do you have any policies or procedures in place that would ensure safety for employees? What happens if we all can come back to work and then in a couple months there's a resurgence of the virus and everybody's back out again? So almost what have we learned in this first round that we might be able to implement something better in the second round? Starting to have those conversations as best that you can. I think you all are getting good at convening meetings virtually. I think we're all getting better at that and understanding what that means and how we can engage our citizens in the processes as well. Then looking long term, past 2021 even, are there other services that we need to be providing, or different services that we need to be providing? Understanding what those future needs are going to be by engaging our partners, and establishing that local recovery task force now is going to be important, so that we can just kind of make sure that we are hearing everybody's voices and getting the information from them that we need. I'm not sure if anybody, I think the Economic Development Corporation, is there someone at the helm there that's working on things now?
Kind of. They're in the process of rehiring their director position, but they do have board members that have stepped in to assist with the information that's coming in from the SBA and pushing that out to local businesses.
Okay, great.
Christy, this is Chris Floyd. I serve as pro bono counsel for the EDC, and I know that John Wells, the president, is staying on top, and so he would be the likely contact for any input or questions that you or anyone else may have right now.
Okay, that's great. That's great. I didn't know if anybody within that organization had been. Yeah, sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
That's okay. I was also going to say John and Bob Dyster, John Wilson, Bob Dyster has also been pushing information out and working hard with different people who are helping with the SBA loans and through the SBDC. So I think that there's a good effort going on, but it's a partial effort because we don't have a director right now.
Sure. Okay. And that if they're able to get information out to the businesses or survey the businesses to understand what those needs are going to be, short and long term, we're seeing more organizations kind of reach out proactively to the business community, almost to validate what we all already know, that the business is down and that there are concerns with them being able to potentially reopen. I sent out to, it went to each of the commissioners and then probably to Sarah Dallas as my point person at Leadville, this idea of, well, the phrase that's been tossed around is a virtual disaster assistance center. As you all may be aware, we work with communities after a disaster to bring together resources to assist communities in recovery, whether it be business or individual resources. And we usually set those up in some sort of community space at a gymnasium or a community center. Well, that obviously isn't going to happen in this instance. So I sent out a resource document in the hopes that there would be an opportunity that at the county level, potentially a resource page could be set up that then the other local governments or partners could link back to get resource information out to the communities. And I don't know if you all have had a chance to kind of establish that, or if you need assistance in working through that, if it's something that you guys are interested in doing.
Christy, I think we are definitely working on that, and as you know, our partners and state agencies, I've seen definitely better kind of collection of the comprehensive resources. I know emergency management is working with their GIS person to create a landing page, right, a dashboard kind of, and some of the nonprofits already have some of that. So we do have some folks working on that. I'm not sure. Can you help me understand what the assistance might be from DOLA to do that? Is that
Do you guys have SIPA? Do you use SIPA?
we do in some, yeah, in some departments.
So you could potentially use them to help set up the page if you wanted to. A lot of communities had already set up a resource page on their website. So
Yep.
I just wanted to feed information to you all that you could put on your website. So there were links to different organizations that were providing resources.
Yep.
And just making sure that you were thinking about locally what information could or should be on the website.
Yeah, I think we're actually currently developing a new website for the county, but like I said, emergency management is working with some folks to consolidate information. So,
okay,
yeah, thank you.
And I think that's the whole thing, is that we need to consolidate. There's a lot of awesome efforts going around. And we really need to identify that point person, as Christy said, and build on the team as necessary. But
Right.
I know that there's a lot of great work going on, specifically with the small businesses. But hopefully that can kind of transition into those bigger questions on what does reopening look like and what does possibly closing again look like, like you mentioned at the beginning.
Let's see. I think that, you know, if you guys have questions or if there's something specific that you want to get started on right away, I'm happy to help you do that. Everybody's kind of in a different place almost mentally on how prepared they are to move forward. So, you know, not here to push you in any certain direction, but, you know, just want to make sure that as you start thinking about recovery, if there's something that we can do, we'll be sending information out as best we can and as fast as we can when we get it. So yeah, just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Thanks, Christy. I think if I could just reiterate, you know, a couple of the points made in the last conversation on, it's not just a reopening of the businesses, but to continue to need, you know, ambulances for transport, or to continue to be prepared with the healthcare system and our overall ability for search and rescue or other emergency responses or needs. You know, I'm sure that Colleen has that in her sights. I think we just have to be sure to include that in our message across the board as we move through that into recovery.
Yeah. So just keeping, and I'm sure Kaylee has talked to you all about this, right? So keeping track of all of your expenses and your time that you've spent on this so that you can, you know, if there's an opportunity for reimbursement in some way, making sure that you have registered for FEMA public assistance and participate on the webinars when that information becomes available, so that you know, are completely, you know, eligible to apply for that reimbursement. Keeping track of your needs, basically. So if you haven't spent money on something, but you know that, you know, we talked about the kitchen, the upgrades to a commercial kitchen in Lake County. So just kind of having almost a running list of things that, you know, if you had the money to address a COVID concern, that once the money comes out, you're like ready to go, that we can look at the needs that you have and hopefully be able to, respond quickly with the funding that's coming out. So it'll be important to have that coordinated effort locally so that you're not duplicating things, or multiple people aren't trying to access funds for the same activity. So just it's almost just kind of focusing your efforts internally a little bit so that you're ready to take advantage of the things that'll be coming. And there's
Hey,
a
Christy?
managing expectations part. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. If, we're used to seeing money come down for like special projects and Homeland Security through the region, do you know, I'd assume that this money would just come down county by county, but do you know if there's any conversation on them saying, hey, you can come together as a region and make these decisions and do, we prioritize things that can obviously be shared county to county. Just wondering if, if that's going to change.
Well, it's a really good idea to be thinking of how regionally we can access the funds. I don't know that it'll be a requirement, but if there are certain activities or purchases or certain things that like Lake and Chaffee could utilize together, or Lake and Summit County, I think that would play well to get additional funds. Unlike, the money that will come into Colorado won't, well, I don't want to say 100% that this is true, but at this time, particularly the CDBG funds that are coming in won't be allocated based on population or need necessarily. That it's not a formula distribution. It'll be based on the needs that are requested, or the requests that are made to the state. So it's not like the entitlement funds where Denver, Colorado Springs, and others get money based on their population. It's not a formula-based distribution at this point, I'll say. All right, well, you all have my number. Text me, call me, whatever you need to do. We're your partner in this in the long haul, and we know it's going to take some time and effort and energy. So just keep me posted if there's something specific that you need. I will continue to send information out to you. Make sure you're taking care of yourselves.
Thanks, Christy.
Excellent. Do you need me to stay on for anything, or are you moving on to something else in your agenda and I will leave you to it?
I think the last thing that we have really is just questions and comments on our agenda. So does anybody have anything for Christy before she leaves?
Well, I guess I would ask Christy this. As you think about how money will roll out from DOLA, will that then attenuate other DOLA funding requests in the near future? I assume that it will.
So we don't expect that the federal funds will compete, or that projects that normally would have come in our regular processes would compete with the funds that are coming from the federal government for coronavirus. We're trying really hard to kind of separate out impact, energy and mineral impact applications, or regular CDBG, where we're reviewing those applications differently from the COVID CDBG CV funds that we'll be reviewing. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that it'll stay that way. There may be a time when we need to add a little more oomph to communities who are facing a COVID issue that can't be dealt with the other funds that are coming in. But at this time, that's not the plan.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, we are trying to identify, because we have so many funding sources that come out of DOLA and the Division of Local Government in particular, we're trying to identify ways where you might be able to use some of the funds that you get from us in a broader way. So conservation trust fund dollars, which are very specific for, you know, parks, recreation, and open space, might you need to use them for something else that maybe was a little bit questionable, but you need them to free up money somewhere else. So we're trying to find ways where we could be flexible in allowing people to use money. All right, well, feel free to reach out with anything else that you have.
Thanks,
Thank
Christy.
you.
Stay healthy.
All right, you too. Bye.
So the last thing we have on our agenda is just questions and comments. Kaylee, Colleen, Janine, do you guys have anything else for us at this point that you'd like to share or want us to chat about in regards to the policy?
Everybody's muted.
I think this is Colleen. So I think, you know, and I apologize, you were cut off at the end, Caitlin. It just could be my phone. But basically, as far as the recovery pieces and, you know, I already see at the state level, they're asking for cuts. They're predicting that cuts are going to need to be made. So as much as that's encouraging to think of all the additional funding that might come in because of COVID-19, it's not enough at this point. And we don't have enough information to just be like, oh, it's business as usual. And I know you're aware of that. I think what would be helpful is knowing, hey, if we have to do a 5% cut, what does that look like? If we have to do a 10% cut, what does that look like? And just gearing up for that and not waiting for that. It'd be great to have those plans already in place of where those cuts might come from. And I have to speak as a director, that would be really helpful, knowing that June is right around the corner. And I think that's kind of my ask in that recovery piece as well.
I appreciate that, Colleen. I agree.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, as Christy said, everyone's at a different place on if they're ready or not to talk about recovery. Personally, I am ready. So I think moving forward, I don't know if we need to have another conversation offline on trying to identify that person who's going to lead this effort, and try and identify everything that's going on, combine it, and start working through that slide deck that I was sharing my screen on, and kind of work through some of those questions as a group, just to kind of get our baseline sooner than later. So let me know how I can assist in carrying on with those conversations.
Would it be appropriate for us to allocate any time of the work sessions that we have planned in the next couple of days to, not next couple of days, but next couple of weeks at the same time, for us to allocate some of that time towards those conversations around recovery, Kaylee? So could we send out that slide deck and start asking folks to compile information in there, and then discuss that during our next work session next Tuesday?
I was hoping for that, to start these conversations, just so we even just grease the wheels and not necessarily making decisions, but just starting it on some level. And I think the slide deck seemed like they'll outline what we have to think about really well.
Yeah, and I think it's
I
important.
can share that.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, this is Colleen again. And I think it's really important to recognize that there's so many moving pieces that if we truly had one point person who's providing information to the commissioners, who has the ability to bring everyone together and just kind of checking in and making sure all those, like, exactly walking through that slide deck, and it's not, you know, the commissioners who have to do that all. Like, is there currently a county employee who's being underutilized who might be able to, you know, shift their responsibilities, or, hey, this is a great opportunity for someone who's wanting to do more, you know, in that capacity, and to give them that responsibility and reassign them. But that's just kind of my thought.
I agree, Colleen. I definitely think if we can streamline the communication, it would make things a lot easier for us to keep track of all the ideas and all the thoughts that are going on. Greg, what's your thought?
Just a second. got to mute my phone. My thought is, yes, I'd love to be having those conversations. Part of the conversation is to be, what is our capacity to continue running our government in the future with diminished tax revenue? And I think that's an important part of what we should be talking about. And that to some degree may inform our conversations about what are we capable of doing into the future. The other part is that, as you guys know, I'm going to go to City Council tonight. I'm going to request what I'll call a business relief package of $200,000, and that will be focused on, as far as what we're presenting to them, that'll be focused on rent or mortgage and utilities, because we think the SBA and SBDC have, and then the PPP, the possibility of the PPP program, have a lot of employee costs covered and some other costs. We're going to focus just on those things, and we're only looking about 2 months out. So if this goes past 2 months, now we have a whole different challenge in front of us in terms of available money to help our community, whether it's our business community or our families survive through this thing.
Okay, Commissioner Mudge or Commissioner Glenn, do you guys have anything that you'd like to add to this recovery effort or planning process?
Sorry, I saw Mark unmute. I was waiting for his comment. I think what I would like to just add, and I know will be a part of the conversation again, is that continued allocation of funds and consideration in the budget for, a continued phases, or if you will, of response through recovery still, because this isn't going to just disappear overnight. And I also feel like we have, our responsibility to the community is to maintain the long-term planning that we've worked so hard to initiate as well, for the benefit of investing in supplementing revenue in the future. So, I'll be thinking about how to keep projects moving and where we can maybe make efficiencies or any compromises in not necessarily access to our services, but where we can really kind of trim the fat and lean down so that we can continue the long-term visioning and strategic planning through this.
Commissioner Glenn, did you want to go ahead?
I really don't have anything to add. It's pretty much all been said.
All right. So Kaylee, if you'll send out the Google Doc and the slide deck, and I would imagine that you can start by sending those out to the same group of people right now, right off the bat. So I think if we can start with that group of people to compile the information into those press releases, and also to look at that slide deck, which would encompass city and county elected officials and administrative staff, that would be helpful. And your incident command group with Janine and Colleen on there, and PIOs. I think that'd be a great start for us at this point to start those conversations and getting that documentation in line. Kaylee, did you have another question or comment?
Yeah, I just have a general comment that's not specifically, or I guess it's a question, excuse me, COVID related, but it's in regard to the social media policy that we've been talking about for our county Facebook pages. Also talked with Michael earlier today, and I know talking with Sarah that we shared that the library has an example, and I also got the idea by looking at Governor Jared Polis' page has it's a little kind of snapshot of their social media policy, and I think Michael mentioned that Chris has been in communication about that, and just wondering if we can move forward and get something quickly.
Yeah, Kaylee, Chris, would you be able to assist Kaylee with the documentation that you passed on to us and Michael in regards to that?
Sure, happy to do it. Do you just need me to forward that information to Kaylee, or is there some?
Yeah, I think if you could forward that to her, and if she can chat with you about what questions and comments she might have on her social media information, that would be helpful.
Sure.
So it might be helpful to just, and I don't want to overwhelm anything, but maybe send it to all directors and elected officials, because we all have, well, most of us have a county Facebook page, and I think it's important that if we adopt something, then every page needs to have that.
Right, I would agree.
Yeah,
I think too, oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say that was my recommendation, that we have a consistent and uniform statement across all the different platforms and pages that say essentially the same thing.
Okay, I think so too.
And I think it's important.
Go ahead.
If we get something that's official, that we also have some messaging to the county departments that, hey, these are requirements, but also that we posted on our page. And, for example, there's like, you're able to delete comments on the governor's page if there's like a thread or something. But I think it would be smart on county departments to take like a screenshot of anything that may be a questionable post on their page as that documentation. So I think there's a miniature little training that needs to happen if we do decide to push out a countywide policy.
Yeah, thanks, Kaylee, for that. Absolutely. The most important thing, if you decide to either take down or block a post or something to that effect, you absolutely need to keep a copy of it in some way, because if there's a challenge as to whether it was properly excluded, you need to have a copy of it in order to be able to prove that.
Thanks, Chris and Kaylee. I think that's a great idea, and I think we will definitely want to also include law enforcement on that conversation, so that if there is something that comes up where we determine we need to have some intervention, they know the proper channel of how to connect with them on that. So Chris, if you'll send that to us and connect with Kaylee, and then we can figure out how to get that pushed out internally, that'd be awesome and helpful.
Sure.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments at this point in regards to anything we discussed today, or
Kayla, this is Paul.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm wondering about your potential meeting with CCI tomorrow. Are you actually having that?
Yeah, it's a CCI's Mountain District meeting. The information should be listed on our planner if you'd like to join that. It's their meeting that we will be joining them in, or are invited to attend.
The information says that Zoom information and time to follow.
So Patty should have sent out a new planner with updated information yesterday. If she didn't, I will forward that to directors and elected officials as soon as we get after this call.
Yeah, I just read from the one she sent out yesterday.
Okay, there were two. I redid two of them yesterday, so I'll be sure to forward that out to you and make sure she has a copy of the right one.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or anything at this point that they'd like to add before we adjourn? No?
Nope.
All right, so I think we'll go ahead and adjourn at 2:20, and then we'll look for that documentation from our EOC group. And we have another work session scheduled tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I was planning on having on the agenda for that work session tomorrow some budget conversations with our finance director, and had invited Mayor Lave to talk to us about any of their information in regards to their stimulus plan or anything that he would like to add in terms of their budget. He's welcome to do that at our meeting tomorrow as well. So we will have another work session tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock and a special meeting on Thursday. So that's all I've got right now. All right.
Thank
So
you.
with that, we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for coming and participating.
Bye.
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 Stay healthy.